This is the BiggerPockets Podcast, show 373.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Brennan, host of the BiggerPockets Podcast, here with my co-host, David Green. David, having a good real estate week, I hear.
Oh my gosh. I had the busiest day I've ever had in my life with real estate 2 days ago, but it came out awesome. The next day, we basically put 4 people under contract. There's a ton of people that are house hacking right now in the Bay Area, which is a perfect market to do it because housing is so expensive, but springtime's coming. So this is like that last mad push when you can try to get people into contract before it just becomes crazy, and it's very exhausting, but it's very rewarding.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, congratulations on that. And I know you got some cool flipping stuff going on as well. So, keep it up. And I'm excited to hang out with you. I think you're coming out here in like a few days.
Couple days, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
the last time I was there, you told me that you're the best real estate agent I've ever heard when you're talking on the phone. And that really did a lot to help with my business. I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, wow. I don't remember saying that, but
every once in a while
welcome.
You say nice, intelligent things if you wait long enough. It's
Speaking of nice, intelligent things, today's episode is with Lee Ripma. I hope I'm saying Lee's last name right. Lee is an incredibly intelligent, I can't even pronounce the word intelligent. Lee is an incredibly intelligent real estate investor, used to be like a scientist, and takes her scientific methods of being awesome and puts them into real estate. And you'll understand why I know I say this a lot, but really, like, this is one of my favorite shows we've recorded like ever. So many good things we cover here. In fact, probably my favorite thing we covered in the whole episode was talking about apprentices and how being an apprentice can make you so much gets you years ahead of everyone else around you. Yeah. And I'm not just talking to newbies. I'm talking to everybody, including David, me, Lee, everyone else. Listen for that. Also, we talk really in depth about how you can invest in an expensive market, in a cheap market, locally, far away. It doesn't matter. Real estate is multidimensional. Stay tuned for that conversation and more. But before we get to that, let's get to today's quick tip. All right, on today's show, we talk with Lee about partnerships, a bit about partnerships and how she's found partners, including partners on BiggerPockets. And so here's what I want to encourage you guys to do is go check out your local real estate forum. We have actually sub forums. There's like a California forum, and then there's like a San Diego forum and a LA forum. So there's like sub forums inside the bigger state forums. Go in there and just see who's in there. Go find some people in your local market. And if you can't find your sub forum, just go to the navigation bar, the little magnifying glass, and the search for your zip code or for your city name, and just see who pops up. See who's active in your area, because those people may end up getting you deals someday. You may end up partnering with them. Maybe they'll lend you money. Maybe you'll work with them. Maybe you'll lend them money. The point being, real estate, you've got to take it from online to offline, and BiggerPockets is a great way to find people to connect with in the real world. So that is my quick tip for today. Let's jump into this. David, any final notes before we bring in Lee?
Yeah, listen to this one twice, everybody. Lee has a lot of information, a lot of value. Brandon actually says some moderately intelligent things this time too, so you don't want to miss those. I would just plan on listening to this one twice because there's a lot of good stuff.
Good stuff. All right, well, with that, let's get to the interview with Lee Ripma. All right, Lee, welcome to the BiggerPockets Podcast. Let's talk about Donald Trump. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Let me redo that. All right, Lee, welcome to the BiggerPockets Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Brandon.
Yeah, so let's talk about your real estate. I got a little bio here of you, and you look like you're crushing it down there. And you're in the LA market, is that right? At least that's where you live?
That's where I live, yes. And I invest locally in LA, and I also invest out of state in Kansas City.
All right. Well, this will be fun because a lot of people that listen say things like, well, you can't invest if you live in LA or San Francisco, New York, whatever. And you're obviously doing it in there and you're doing it other places. So you're kind of hitting both ends of the spectrum there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. So let's start at the beginning then. How did you get into real estate investing?
Yeah. So, I sort of took the more standard path, right? Growing up, I didn't know anyone who was a real estate investor. My parents owned houses, but they were really just to live in, that sort of thing. So I really followed my passions and I loved math and science. And so I became a field biologist. And I did that professionally. I worked professionally as a biologist for 13 years. Wow. And I actually just quit my day job about 4 months ago. So I started out, I had this other career, and I just sort of had this epiphany that all day jobs are dead end jobs, right? Even if they pay you really well, because you're always building something for somebody else. And so knowing that, I kind of had this idea. So for my day job, I was part of the entitlement process for development. So that's my specialty, is helping people comply with biological laws related to development and impacts. So David, yeah, you live in California, so you know what like an environmental impact report is, right? So
yes, I do. That's my favorite part of my job, is getting the privilege of reading those.
Yes, pretty dull. So I wrote the technical appendices that underlie those documents. Thrilling.
Oh.
So if you have like an endangered species survey, that would be me. Anyway, so I was doing that, and so I knew a little bit about development, and I just kind of had this idea, like maybe I could become a developer. This is like back in 2016. And I had this thesis that, the future of living was smaller. And so I was like, I'm going to become a tiny house developer, right? This is like my whole idea. And so I'm at home and I'm telling my roommate, yeah, I've got this idea. And he's like, well, have you ever heard of BiggerPockets? And I had never heard of BiggerPockets. So I started listening to episodes, and I had listened to about 3 of them. And I came home and told him, I'm gonna buy enough real estate that I can be on the BiggerPockets podcast.
That's awesome.
So here I am. It was like 4 years ago, right? So I have this idea. I'm going to become a tiny house developer, right? So in order to vet my idea, I have to learn how to underwrite commercial real estate, right? So I can still remember like really struggling through this article on BP, like trying to figure out net operating income and all my costs and everything. And it was really, it was hard. But I got through it and I figured it out. And then turns out my idea was terrible.
The tiny house thing, it doesn't pencil out or what?
The numbers were just awful, right? And so I realized, okay, well, that's not the path, but now I knew how to underwrite commercial real estate. And I remember I was talking to my brother, and he's like a kind of a Silicon Valley like tech guy. And he's like, okay, pitch me your idea. Right. So I'm trying to do all this novel stuff in real estate, like I'm going to be future of living is smaller and I'm going to be a tiny house developer. And he was like, why don't you just do like the standard thing? Right. And you can innovate later if you want to. And
Wait. He's a Telecon Valley guy, and he said you could innovate later. This man stands alone as a god among men in Silicon Valley. Practical thinking, I love it.
Yeah. So he said that. And then I remember on a podcast, I heard Andrew Cushman talking about how he had all these different ideas, and he was trying them all out. And I had the same thing, like, I'm going to make a backpack that can carry a yoga mat. Like I had all these like ridiculous ideas, right? And then I was like, oh, this is great. I'm actually just going to follow the totally standard path. And then I can innovate later. And now, years later, I am innovating a bit, but I followed the standard path to get started.
This is such a good point, because, I bring this up occasionally on like BiggerPockets webinars where I talk about people, like if you want to start a business, like let's say you're like have this really great idea and you're like, I want to do a mobile dog washing grooming business for Chihuahuas. And you're like, I'm going to do it. Like that's like not been done in your area ever. And it's kind of a gamble. I mean, it's a huge gamble. Like you're just completely risking everything. But I'm like, when you get into real estate, it's like, not like dozens or hundreds, but millions and millions and millions of people have done exactly what you want to do. And so like, it's just like, okay, follow the script that's been done millions and millions and millions of times before and just do what everyone else is doing. And it tends to work okay.
I heard such a good quote. I just got back from Dallas for the Keller Williams family reunion event, and Gary Keller was talking. And so Simon Sinek was supposed to be talking, but he actually got the flu really bad.
Oh, no.
He and I were laid out. And Gary said something that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to hear. And he said, you just have to make peace with the fact that success is going to come from doing the boring thing over and over and over.
I just read that today, his quote saying that. Yeah.
Really?
I was like, that is so good. That's like a David quote. And then that's funny you brought that up.
Yeah, we never want to, because innovation just sounds so much fun, right? And that's exactly what happens. You get caught up in that. But the reality is, like you put in so much work to get good at doing something, and you've done like surfing, right? Surfing sucks, I'm sure. Well, Brandon loves it, but I don't love doing anything I'm not good at. It was not fun the first 2 times that I went, because you just swim a lot and your shoulders get tired. You don't ever do anything. So if I finally got good at surfing, it'd be like, oh, now I learned it, I'm going to go do something else. Why? That's when you get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I could not agree more. You have to make peace with the fact that success will become boring if you just stay focused on what you're doing and kind of scale from there. And there is a point to work innovation in, but it's not until you're on a well beaten path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. All right. So what did you end up doing? What is that well beaten path that you followed for the first deal?
Yeah. So I remember it was right before my wedding in 2016. I took off. I went to Iceland with a friend of mine. We're driving around Iceland in the rain and I put on a BiggerPockets podcast and I was like, I want to do this. Right. And he's like, I want to do it too. So we're like, great, we're partners. Right. So we started looking into a bunch of different markets. So we lived in San Diego at the time. So we were looking at that. And then we were looking at having a vacation rental in Mammoth Lakes because we both really loved it. It's a mountain town here in California. And I kept everything I was underwriting, it just had negative cash flow. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't get how you can scale negative cash flow. This makes no sense. So why don't I go out of state, right? At the time, I was very sold on cash flow markets. And so this is great. This is how I picked Kansas City, right? I'm a scientist by training. Ready? I Googled top 10 cash flowing markets in the United States. And I went down the list and I was like, yeah, Omaha, Des Moines, like they're all in the Midwest. And I didn't know anyone in any of them. And I didn't know anything about any of them, except for I had been to Kansas City one time in college and I knew it was cool. And my partner at the time was a Kansas City Chiefs fan. So we're like, that's it. Kansas City.
Yeah, they got a good team. That's how I pick where I invest.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, they weren't good though.
They weren't good.
Okay. Yeah, we were lamenting that we didn't buy season tickets then. So anyway.
Can we just highlight how this is exactly what Brandon says, where he says, just pick something and go do it. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you pick as long as you pick it. Like you just chose a name out of some MSN.com list that somebody threw together. You're like, okay, I'll go there. And now I'm really excited to hear what you went and did with it. But I love that you're you're a scientist. And you said, I'll just Google whatever Google says and go do it. And what do you know? You end up on the BiggerPockets podcast. Obviously you did it well.
Right. And I think, and I'm all about that. Like I tend to have an action bias, right? Where I'm like, it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're moving forward, because if you're moving forward, you can always pivot later. Yeah. Right. So I just wanted to get started. So what I did is I found what I thought was a deal in Kansas City. I called up a broker who I found on BiggerPockets. I was like, hey, is this a deal? And he was like, yeah, that's a deal. And I was like, okay, great. So I flew to Kansas City and I remember it was winter. And so everyone in Kansas City is wearing like jeans and like sweatshirt. And I have this giant parka, like down jacket.
It's not hard to spot the Californian when we go out of state.
These snow boots. And I'm like, what? It is so cold here. It's like the dead of winter. Right. So then, so I ended up like losing that deal. Right. And someone else bought it ahead of me, which I think was fine. But while I was there, so this is totally crazy. I was driving around Kansas City, right? And I'm like, okay, I need to find, and I talk about this a lot, like the MSA, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, whatever it might be, right? LA. It doesn't matter as much as the submarket. So within each of those MSAs, there's a submarket and there's great submarkets and there's terrible submarkets and there's submarkets that meet your needs. And so you're really after a submarket, right? And so I'm driving around, I'm looking for that submarket and I'm like, it's like not it. It's like not it. This isn't it. Oh, this is it. So I found this place and I just really thought like, this is it, right? It's only 10 minutes north of downtown. There's a bunch of redevelopment going along on the main street. There was this cool bar that had all this pickleball going on and lots of young people. And I just thought, okay, this is it, right? And then there was a guy posting on BiggerPockets. This has not happened before or since. Like, I've got this deal under contract and I don't know how much the rehab's going to be. I end up talking to this guy on the phone. I'm like, hey, look, if you bail on that deal, like, let me know. So he's like, yeah, I'm bailing on the deal. So he gives me his inspection report. So I've got the inspection report for this 4-unit building. The owner is in distress. He has a commercial loan and the bank has called a note on the loan. And he's also getting divorced. So he's like double motivated, right? And so I look, and on the same street, he actually owns multiple properties and he has one other one on the market. So I'm like, okay, this is great. So I make him a cash offer. So the list on the 4-plex was 175 and the list on the duplex was 150. So it was 6 units total, duplex and a 4-plex. So I make him a cash offer. The total list was 325, cash offer 225. right? And he immediately accepts it. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh man, I should have offered lower.
That's exactly what they say.
So that's what I did. That was actually my first deal in Kansas City. So it was a BRRRR deal. It had a ton of rehab. And did I mention that I don't know anything about construction?
All right, so let's go into that. A lot of people are terrified by that first deal if it's a rehab. So how did you get through the rehab? What was that like? What was your experience? Was it all easy? Did you learn a lot? Like,
it was not easy. It was actually a total nightmare. But I got through it, right? And I think that's the important thing. So I think what I did is I took everything that I've been hearing on the BiggerPockets podcast. Like, what does everyone say? Like, you got to do value add. Don't buy single family homes. Like, just go bigger. Okay, well, how about I just listen to these people, right? So I went and I did it, and it was great. I thought that I kind of had it figured out, but it turned out that I didn't. So I had this broker, and that broker was both a property manager and a rehabber. Red flag. So he like, while we were still in escrow, had come up with this rehab budget for me. And I thought I was really ahead of the game because I had this thing, and I think the rehab budget was like 45 grand on the fourplex, and it was like maybe 20 grand on the duplex. It was like 60 grand all in. And, it was all laid out and everything. And so I thought, okay, this is great. Like, I'm just going to send this guy checks. He's going to send me pictures, and this, this rehab's just going to all be buttoned up. Right. But it wasn't. So the communication kind of starts lagging on the rehab, right? And I just told my partner, you know what? I'm just going to fly out there. I'm just going to see what's going on. So I get out there, and I will never forget this. It was a heat wave in Kansas City. It's July. And I go into my fourplex, which is it's basically gutted, right? And I just remember thinking like, man, this project is such a disaster, and it's like never going to be finished. And so I go in, I don't really know anything about my construction. My partner knows about construction, but I know a lot about project management and getting things done. And I knew that what was going on was a complete disaster, right? So I remember calling my partner and just saying, we have to fire this guy. I don't know what we're going to do, but we can't use him anymore. And so we did. We fired him. We ended up taking over the project. We almost acted as like general contractors. Then we found another contractor. So I thought I had this $60,000 rehab that was going to take me a couple months. It's going to be great. I was going to, and I was in it all cash. So we could talk about financing on it if you want to, but I was in it all cash. And so I thought I was going to, do this refinance. It was going to be great. Well, it ended up taking me to finish that rehab. I closed escrow in March, and I didn't get my cash out refinance until December. So it took me a long time to do that rehab. And the rehab was also way more expensive. Like, I thought it was going to be 60 grand, and it was 150 grand, 140 grand.
Oh, wow.
So It was way over budget, way over time, but it actually totally worked out because I did a nice rehab. I could get these high rents, and my values actually came back from really high from the bank. So I was able to cash out pretty much all of my money. So I actually did successfully complete a BRRRR deal. And then I later exited those projects at a profit. So it all ends well, but at the time it was very, very difficult, going through it. But at the same time, I ended up spending a lot of time in Kansas City, getting to know a lot of local people, having a nice local network, which I think is key in your market, And so there's a lot of good things that came out of that. I also learned a ton about rehab.
Yeah, so to go back to this surfing analogy David used earlier, it's like the first time you went out on the surfboard, you went out there and you fell off your board, and then you got hit by a wave and you scraped your face in the bottom of the ocean. You got a little scar. And then you went out the second time, you did it again, and you went out a couple more days. And so like most people would look at it and be like, man, surfing sucks. Yep. You should just quit. Yep. Like that sounds like a horrible thing. But now today you're like riding waves, like, doing yoga while, upside down on a wave, because like you can't get to the other end. You can't become a good surfer without being a crappy one. You can't become a good real estate investor without going through the difficult times. But most people just stop. They just don't do it. So do you regret those first deals, or you just obviously would just do them differently today?
Not for a second. Actually, I wouldn't do anything differently. Right.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I would have, like, now when I do deals like that, obviously I'm aware of my rehab budget going in. I'm aware of the timelines. obviously those go smoother, if you will, today. And I have structures that make it go smoother today, but I wouldn't take that back for anything, right? Because that experience was so, so valuable. And I learned a ton, and I also made money. I mean, the thing that really, I remember I ran kind of my numbers when I finished the project, and my cash on cash return was like 28%. And I was like,
wow,
great, boom, sold, like that was a botch job, you know?
Isn't that what's awesome about real estate, especially if you're doing a BRRRR deal, that you can screw it all up and your consolation prize is a 28% ROI? And I'll hear people complain about that. I thought I was going to get all my money back out of the deal. The contractor screwed me over. The ARV came in low. David, in your book, you said to do this and I did it and it didn't work. And I'm like, okay, so everything went wrong and you have a 28% return on money and $40,000 in equity on the first deal you ever did.
And $1 million in education.
Yeah. That's
killer deal right there.
Lee, you have the right perspective. It's that you didn't expect surfing to be easy when you first did it. Right. So what happens is Brandon and I are metaphorically surfing in real estate, and we're having so much fun that we're talking to each other like, we got to tell everybody about this. It's just the best feeling ever when real estate works great and you make $100,000 on a flip, or you get this cash flowing property and you get to live off the cash flow. So we're people who espouse the virtues of surfing. We are out there disciples of, we love surfing. We're telling everybody about it. And so people hear about it, they say, that sounds fun. And then they go have the experience of, scraping their face on the bottom of the ocean and swallowing salt water and not catching a wave. And they say, oh, that's a bunch of crap. It doesn't work. And I shake my head because, well, did riding a bike go that way for you? When you got on a bike, did you just take off down the street and you were super good at it? Why? At every other thing in life, were you okay to take the bumps and the knocks, learning how to do it? But with real estate, there's this understanding that, it should just be easy right away.
And there's just no way through it, right? You've got to have these projects, you've got to go through these rehabs. And what's amazing is how much you learn going through it. Like you can read about it in a book all you want, but the experience is really what is going to teach you. And I think I have this relationship with, I have like mental fortitude where I'm able to go through that. And even when I was standing, in that moment, I always remember when I was standing in my half done vacant project that was just like, basically like, I don't know, catching my money on fire. Like it was just like churning through all this money. I still, even though that was hard, I was like, I will get through this, right? I believed that I would be able to get through it and I would be able to be successful. And I had no illusions that it was hard, but it's okay that it's hard. Most things in life that are worth doing are actually hard. Yeah.
That's really good. So what came next? I mean, you didn't give up. So did you buy more in Kansas City then?
Yeah, I did. Yep. So I started out and doing really like these BRRRR deals, right? And I have since transitioned to doing, it's always been multifamily, but I would say I switched to doing more of a value add multifamily model in Kansas City. And to me, the difference is, a BRRRR deal is like highly distressed, right? And you can only get cash financing. You kind of have these really unknown problems, this big construction budget, right? And if you do a value add multifamily, you're going in, you have these identifiable problems. You're probably turning one unit at a time and you can get bank financing. So you're still getting the same result, which is that you're adding a lot of value and then you're able to do a refinance. It's just on a little bit of a longer time scale, but it also really reduces your risk. And so going in, I didn't have that much capital to start with. And so I really wanted to get these high cash on cash returns, and BRRRR was really appealing. And now the value add multifamily is actually more where I'm focused on my long-term portfolio.
That's a pivot. You started, you learn, you realize, okay, I've got momentum going. Now I can take what I learned and apply it and something works better, and you pivot.
Yep, exactly. But if you don't get started, there's nothing to pivot.
Yes. I was thinking when you started talking about that whole momentum idea, and I couldn't come up with a good analogy, but it's really good that if you're like, I don't know which direction I want to go, getting started is always the hardest no matter what direction you're going to pick. So you're better off to build momentum in some direction. And this is where I couldn't come up with an analogy for the first time. And then move your momentum from wherever you started to the next area and enter that with the momentum, as opposed to stopping and starting.
Apollo 13 style, you can like swing around the moon and pivot by using your momentum. and gravity.
that
Look at
happened in that
analogy.
movie?
It did. It did. They
Had
went
a
around
baby
the earth.
Space cowboy. Yeah,
Look at that.
there you go.
But they couldn't have done that. Yeah, they were not moving. So
Totally.
very cool. All right, so you're started doing these value add multifamily, and I like the way you kind of differentiate that, because when we think BRRRR, again, I think like usually single family house or very small multifamily, it's a nasty property. You usually buy it with a hard money lender or cash or something like that, and then you fix it up and you go to a bank, and it's a little bit, it is risky. I mean, it's not a risk-free thing because you're dealing with a big rehab, versus you're buying a multifamily that's already rented. It's just not maybe it's a C-class property and you want to turn it into a B-class property. So you buy it at C and you improve it one by unit at a time to a B. And then maybe you still can refinance to get your money back out and go and do it again. So it's just, that's kind of how you differentiate, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think a bank doesn't want to touch those really nasty properties, right? If there's a giant hole in the roof and, you know, some of the units are gutted and it's vacant, and, you know, that's not a bank financing type property. That is their collateral, and they're not interested in having that as collateral, right?
Yep.
But once it's nice and it's rented, and a lot of times it'll be just like you said, it's a reposition, or you've got tenants who are paying maybe $500 a month, but you know, in that area, if you were to renovate nicely, you could get $800 a month, or, you know, there's some delta there in, you know, potential rent versus rent right now. And all you have to do to unlock that is some cosmetic renovations. Like, great.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing we don't talk about a lot on the show, but I'll bring it up here because I'm just fascinated by this, that concept that real estate is so like multidimensional. Like you said, like that, it might be rented for $500 a unit right now, but and maybe you're fine with that investment, it works out just fine. But I like asking that question. Well, what if you were to rehab it with 30 grand? Then what it would rent for? What if I rehabbed it for 150 grand? Then what could it rent for? And I'm not saying you put more money and you're naturally going to get higher rent all the time. There's limits, but this is where you can see opportunity where others don't, because you realize, hey, this market is actually improving dramatically, and there are some higher rent, you know, higher rent comps around the area. Yeah. And so you're saying, hey, I'm going to think creatively about what this could be, and so you're finding deals that way, which is cool. I'm curious, I guess, of how you're able to do this long distance. I mean, living in LA, you're not flying out to Kansas City every week, I'm sure. So what are some of the tips and tricks and tools and ideas that make this work for you buying in Kansas City without being able to be there every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a structure that I don't know, I haven't heard anyone really talk about, where I have a local partner on all of my deals. And so we're splitting that deal in some way, right? And they're actually they're doing the rehab. Sometimes they're doing the property management as well, especially while we're turning it around. And then we're splitting it. And so we're both bringing to the table, you know, whatever we're bringing to the table, but that way they are there, they're invested in the project, and they're making sure it's a success. So that's been really powerful for me. And I know other people have other systems, and I'm sure those work, but this has been great for me.
I love the idea of local partners if you're going to go long distance. When I bought my mobile home park the first time, like when Ryan Murdoch brought it to me, he was just like, hey, I don't know if you want this, but it's a 50 unit that you said you wanted, so here you go. And I was like, I love this deal. There's no chance I'm doing it without you. Cause like I don't know that market. I don't know the contractors. I don't know the first thing about anything in that market. And so, yeah, that's super smart. So how are you finding partners, and then how do you vet them, and how do you like know you're going to work well with them?
I have found them through different ways, right? I think most of it's just networking, could be chalked up to networking, but like one of them I met through my agent. He was also working with her as an agent. And then another one I met because we were investment property neighbors. He owned the property next door to me. And another one I met through BiggerPockets, just through networking. And I think one thing to think about when you're looking, if you want to do a local partner or just want to work with anyone, is that you really have to vet kind of their mindset and their approach and make sure it jives with yours.
Yes.
That is really, really critical. And I have made the mistake of not doing it.
Yeah, that's because not everybody wants the same thing. Not everyone approaches problems the same way, business the same way. So you want someone to like it's like a partnership. It matters like their skill, but it almost matters more their heart, you know, like going into stuff. Because when things go bad or when you have a disagreement, how do you get through those things?
How do you treat people? How do you treat your contractors? What's your relationship like, time versus money? You know, what's your right? Like, because I remember my first partner, we were friends and I didn't really vet him. He's a great guy. He's a great friend, but his primary motivation was to save every single penny possible. And I remember us having this argument where he was like, $100 is $100. And I was like, not if it takes 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we had this fundamental difference.
That's probably why David and I don't work together yet. Because I'm putting together IKEA chairs in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And David's like, let's hire someone to do this, man. What are you doing? I'm like, yeah, but I can save $20 by putting together this IKEA chair.
Yeah.
I really like the point you made, Lee, about like money is money, but so is time. And really, if you think about it, for almost everyone listening to this, money and time are the same thing because you trade time to get money for the most part. Even if it's not working at a job, you're still trading time out of your day to make money. So when you think about something costs $100, you also have to think about how much time will I spend to save the $100 or get back if I spend $100. If I can spend $100 and have someone else do the work, can I make $1,000 with that time, right? And I've really changed the way I look at money, and I've almost looked at money as just a different representation of time. And then throw into it energy, right? But Brandon likes to put that IKEA chair together because it relaxes him and he feels accomplished and he enjoys doing it. I don't. It frustrates me. It takes me too long. I want to be done. I want to be doing something else.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'll call someone from TaskRabbit to assemble my IKEA furniture.
If I had TaskRabbit in Maui, I would probably do that.
Listen, Brandon, you can find someone to assemble your. Do you have Craigslist?
I may.
We do have Craigslist.
Cause.
Don't waste your time.
This morning, just before this, I was transcribing my own video that I recorded this morning. I'm like doing transcriptions and edited the whole video and the whole time I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I even have like people that work with me and that do video editing, but I was like, it'll take me longer to upload it than it will be just me to do it myself. Not true. But, so Mario,
my flip partner, Mario Mazamuto, he's Brandon's friend, and we had the very same conversation I had with Brandon. Awesome. Right? Mario runs an appraisal business, and he told me about how he and I wanted to flip more houses, but he didn't have time because he's doing like tons of appraisals. And it was a super easy thing to leverage. Like, he's got assistants that know how to do it. He's trained them what to do. There's a science to doing appraisals. He really just needs to verify like the last couple steps to make sure it was there. Why is he going to the house and taking the pictures and entering all the stuff in himself? So he finally is like, I'll give it a try. And in 2 weeks, he said, I'm never going back. I don't know why it took so long. And now we're flipping all these houses because Mario has time. So this is a complete side note. I don't know how we got onto this topic, but I'm a very big fan of leveraging other people to do stuff and focusing on what you do best. And it sounds, Lee, like what you're saying is when you're picking a partner, find someone with a similar philosophy. If your partner wants to be out there doing the works, like I read a critique on Goodreads of my long distance investing book, and the guy said, a book about buying rehab properties from a guy that doesn't know how to change a lock. No thanks, like why would you want the guy that changes the lock to write the book on how to put systems together?
Well, here's the thing. That guy doesn't have time to write the book. He's out changing locks.
Or he can buy the houses. Yeah, he's changing my locks for me. That's exactly right. But it's a good point. You don't want to partner with that person if they're going to be out there, saving money, finding old nails they can straighten out and put back into the wood instead of looking for the next deal or managing the people or, saving money somewhere better.
Yeah. And I've always had this philosophy, like when I was in graduate school, I was kind of famous for saying time is money because nothing is less valuable than a graduate student's time. I mean, they would just spend, it drove me nuts. They would spend 3 months to save like $500. I'm like, you can outsource that, right? So then to do my thesis project, I wanted to do this really complicated DNA sequencing thing and I outsourced it. And everyone was like shocked, right? I'm like, I got a grant to pay for the outsourcing. And then like, lo and behold, here's my project. And the thing about this DNA sequencing, not to go too high into it, is that you didn't know if it didn't work until the end. So, you could waste 2 months and then it didn't work and you wouldn't know, right? Yeah. Let's task that out to a professional.
Yeah, that's great.
So what are some of the things that you do now, Lee, with your time? What have you found is the highest and best use of your time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think so I have these different things that I'm doing, right? Like we've been talking about my portfolio in Kansas City, but I also do development here in LA. So that is what I quit my day job to do. So I think right now in development, I spend a lot of time talking with investors, talking with potential sellers. So I think connecting with people is a good use of my time because no one else can do that in the way that I can, right? And I used to run a consulting business and I had staff that would, they could go and do the work. They could go and do the surveys for the Keynote Checker Spot Butterfly. But I was the one who talked to the clients and explained to them, like, this is what we need. Here's how we're going to approach this project. Here's what it's going to cost. And I couldn't outsource that portion of it. Right. So I think I know it sounds strange, but connecting with people, forming relationships with people, I think that is actually a very good use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I still do, I do all my own underwriting. I'm looking at deals. I'm going through deals. I'm calling agents, because what I'm doing in LA is I'm usually buying like a single family home, tearing it down and building a fourplex. It's actually 2 duplexes on a lot. But anyway, so I am the one who knows, like, okay, this is the zoning that's going to work. And they, there's this setback. And that's the kind of thing that's pretty hard to task out to someone else.
Did you say you were buying single family houses, tearing them down, and then building up fourplexes on them? That's
yes,
cool.
But it's actually 2 duplexes, but yes.
Okay, let's talk about that, because that's
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah.
How do you get into that? Like, how are you one day you're like, I'm gonna go tear down a house and go build 4 units on it?
No, that's a great question. Well, going back to the beginning of my story, right? We talked about how I had this kind of idea that I could become a developer.
Yeah.
And that was actually something that was always intriguing to me, because, okay, so backing up, I really love real estate because you can create money out of thin air, right? You create money. And as a scientist, I'm very taken with this, right? Because matter cannot be created nor destroyed, but money can.
Real estate is the real alchemy.
Right? Yes. So that, creating equity has always been really what I focused on. And I'm a big fan of creating equity. And I'll talk to people about how equity is really like the big driver of your return on investment. But anyway, so development fits into that, right? Because you're creating a lot of equity. You're taking this, crappy old house, and you're tearing it down and you're building 2 big duplexes, right? And so you're really increasing the value of that, and you can create a ton of equity doing it. And so I really like that. But so what are the steps that I took to get into development? I did it actually through personal relationships, right? So I started out in real estate, and I remember I met this guy. It was actually at a pride parade. So he's the kind of guy who's in a pride parade. He's not gay. And our wives actually work together. And so we're in this pride parade, and then he's like this real estate developer. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I want to get into real estate. And then once I had done a couple deals, I sent him, and I was like, hey, check it out. Like, check out what I did. And I just kept in touch with him over like the years. And then finally it kind of came, he was like, well, why don't you come in? Like, we need someone to do acquisitions. You're an agent. Why don't you come in and you can help us and you can learn? And development is actually very, very complicated. And so it's more of an apprenticeship almost. So the only way to learn it is to almost be an apprentice, right? And I had tried to teach myself some of this stuff, and I was not very successful. So getting in with them and then being able to provide value, because I was an agent and I was able to close these deals. And then they showed me like, okay, this is what you do. This is what you need to look for, because they taught it to me, and their masters, I learned it so quickly. Right. And so now I can go out and do it. And then, I could source those lots, and then I bring them to them, and I'm like, okay, this one works. See, here's all the underwriting. Then they check it and they're like, yeah, that works. Okay, let's do it. Right. So that is how I went from, I guess, being a biologist who had never invested in real estate to being a developer 4 years later.
So I want to bring something up here. We don't talk enough about this, but for thousands of years, I don't know, maybe longer, forever, humans operated on the apprenticeship sort of model. Like, you just learn from somebody else who taught you that. Like, what that kind of went away over the last 50 years, but like that is one of the greatest ways to get started investing in real estate, is to go work for a real estate investor. And people today, like, I feel like are I don't know if greedy is the right word, but like so independent. Like, no, I'm going to figure this out on my own. I'm going to go like do this. Like, I can guarantee you, if I would have spent the first I've been now for 14 years, I've been in real estate, or 13 years, I've been in real estate. Had I spent the first 3 years instead working for somebody who was doing what I'm doing today, I would be way further than where I am today. Like in the beginning, yes, you might feel like you're going slow because you're not actually buying real estate of your own, or you don't have the biggest share or piece of the puzzle. You might be getting, either no equity or maybe 1 or 2, 5% of a deal, whatever. And so you feel like you're going slower than somebody else who starts at the same time. But because you're learning so much more and way faster right then, your 5-10 years down the road, you're going to be so much further ahead. I mean, actually, just yesterday, my buddy Micah just started working for me. He's actually in my sea shed here right now. Just started working as a kind of our bookkeeper, but he's jumping in from not having bought any real estate to now he's seen how we buy hundreds of units in mobile home parks and flip 6-figure houses. So like, hopefully 10 years from now, he's way farther along than where he would have if he wouldn't did it all by himself, just starting from day one. And so, I think the apprenticeship thing is just such a great idea. In fact, David, you've done the military apprenticeship thingy, right?
Yeah,
and
several times.
I'm doing my first. Yeah, I'm doing my first one here shortly. I got a guy coming out to move to Maui for 6 months to do an internship.
Nice.
The military
so
pays
what Brandon's
for it.
referring to is called the Skills Bridge program in the Air Force. Different branches have names. But the military will pay military members for the last 6 months of their employment to go intern with somebody for free and learn skills to help their transition. So if you're in the military and listening, call me, call Brandon if you want to check it out.
It's cool. Cool.
This is on my mind every single day. It's like I cannot stop thinking about this because as I'm trying to grow my business, I have all these people that say, I want to come learn from you, David. And then we sit down and they know nothing about how to do the job they want to do. And they want me to pay them to learn how to do something they're supposed to be helping me with, and take 6 to 9 months before they even know how to do the thing that I've been paying them to do. And then I don't even know if they're going to do it well. And it doesn't make any economic sense. So what happens is they don't get hired. They don't learn. They keep listening to a podcast and they never actually make any progress. And I was getting interviewed on a different podcast for Acton Academy a couple of weeks ago. And I realized when I was saying it that I make more money now in real estate in 1 month than I used to make in about 2 years when I was like in college or right after college. It almost from a financial sense didn't make sense for me to work during that time when you compare how much money I can make now with the skills I have versus then. My time is worth so much more. And if I had done what you said, Brandon, if I had trained underneath someone else who was doing this for free, when I finally started being able to do it, you're going to make so much money. If you average it out over the year or two that you didn't make much or anything, you still come out way ahead. And that's the thing is like what Lee said on that BRRRR deal, I got $100,000 education, or maybe Brandon, you said that. And I ended up making money. And if you really want to learn tough things like this, that's the way you have to think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to hire, right, in my former life as a biologist, I would hire biologists, and I would never hire anyone unless they had one marketable skill. So you either had to know how to identify birds, like you had to have something that I could put you to work on right away. Otherwise you didn't get hired with me. And it's like, oh, well, I can learn. Well, I don't care. Go learn then. And then give me a call.
That's exactly what I tell them when they say, hey, I'm a really hard worker. Bring me on and hire me and teach me. I'm like, then go learn how to do it. And then you have the skills to apply for the job you're asking to get, right? Or if you don't want to do that, come work for me for free and I'll teach you. And so far, I've had 4 people that said I'll do it, and then all of them flaked before they actually came. They didn't want to come learn. And it's a very high chance that a year from now, they'll be in the exact same situation that they're at in life.
Yep.
So true story. I mentioned Micah a minute ago. Micah, I'm going to talk about you again. So Micah, here's the story of how Micah came on. So Micah sent me a letter. He's been listening to the podcast for a while, New Bigger Pockets. Sent me a letter to my house. Just said, hey, thanks for the podcast. Sent me a gift card. What was it, $25 or something like that to Monkey Pod, which is my favorite restaurant. So clearly knew what I was interested in. So then I asked him just to help out, just helping out with the bookkeeping. He had experience bookkeeping and doing financial stuff. Just helping with the flip stuff, organizing it. Just give him a little bit because he brought a marketable skill to the table, which was knowing how numbers worked and knowing how bookkeeping worked. And anyway, he did an awesome job of that, just knocked out of the park. And so then I don't know what it was, a month ago, I offered him a full-time job, working here. And so bring that marketable skill. But I didn't even know that until he had worked, for a couple months, just helping me figure out on a small level. So yeah, the apprentice thing, the working for other people, it's so key. So I would actually challenge everyone listening to this. I know there's 2 types of people right now listening to this. There's people that are just getting started going, oh man, I want to go work for a bigger real estate investor. But then I want to turn the table a little bit and talk to everybody who's like David and Lee and me. Who can we, not that we're going to go drop everything we're doing right now and go work 40 hours a week, but who can we learn from that's where we want to be 5 years from now? Right? Because oftentimes we kind of the experienced people have this big head of we're the top and there's somebody else that's going to learn from us. Yeah. But we actually, if we humble ourselves and say, hey, we're just kids and newbies at the same time compared to where we're going to be, we're newbies to our future self. So who can we go learn from and apprentice under that's 10 years further down the road from where we are?
And how can you add value to that person, right? What can you do? Because reciprocity is like a strong human emotion, right? So maybe that person needs an introduction to an investor, or maybe they need your take on whatever it would be, right? Don't go to them and say, how can I help you? That's the worst, right? So think of something, right, that you can help them with and go and add value, and it'll come back to you, right? And if it's okay if it doesn't, you have to go into it like that with no expectations, but it comes back in life, right? And and I have this whole sort of philosophy of life, right? Where you have to think about other people's needs and make sure their needs are getting met, right? Like, so I have these local partners, and I would never try to like hose them on a deal, right? Maybe I would be in a position to, but I never would, because if you hose someone on a deal, you're going to do exactly one deal with them. I'm not interested in doing one of anything. I always say, like, do one so you can do 10, right? So I'm building these relationships with people so that we can go do lots and lots and scale together and do lots of stuff. So I'm always negotiating to fair.
Yeah. You don't want to screw people over because it's going to come back to you. I mean, I had this conversation yesterday with a guy who is local here to Maui. Is a friend of mine who wants to get into like wholesaling or like he wants to get into flipping eventually and rentals eventually. But in the beginning, I was just like, just help me find some deals, and like, we'll make sure you're compensated. We'll make sure you get paid somehow, whether or not you do the official wholesale contract to sign it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, normally that's not done that way because somebody could screw you over. Like if you bring me a deal, like I will make sure I take care of you. But like I would like, and he kind of asked the question like, well, like, what if you just like took the deal for yourself? And I've heard other people say that as well. Yeah, but then I'm never getting a deal from you again. Yeah. So why would I screw you over if you brought me something good? If you have the skill to bring me a deal, why would I screw you over? Because I just like would be I'd be killing the golden goose, right?
Absolutely. So, and trust and relationships really make the world go round, right? We may write up everything into LLC operating agreements and things, but that isn't what governs everyday communication and partnerships.
100% agreed.
So Lee, can you share with us a little bit about what your portfolio looks like now?
Yeah. So right now I'm in the I'm in the middle of an exchange actually, but so currently that I own, I have 23 units. So 22 of those are in Kansas City, Missouri, and one of them is in Mammoth Lakes, California.
Oh, you got the vacation rental?
I sure did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Next, you just need the tiny home community, and you're set. All your dreams have been come true.
It's so amazing, though. Really, I've been thinking about it. I should buy a mobile home park and make it into my tiny home community. You probably should.
Actually, we have been having legit conversations out here in Maui lately about building a campground, like a tiny home community / campground / like. Get a bunch of old like VW buses, and I don't know. You and me we could make a nice. I could be your local partner here in Maui, and you can do the rest. And it'll be great.
Let's do it. I've got an exchange. I'm ready to buy some land. Like, let's do it.
This is great. I have a feeling though, like the reason we haven't moved forward is I feel like it's gonna be very much like your first entrance into tiny homes. Is like, wait, this doesn't make any financial sense whatsoever.
You know why it doesn't make any sense? Because the cost of a tiny home is way too high.
Yeah.
It's tiny, and yet it's so expensive.
It is. And I think there's solutions to that like, especially if you like can get them pre-built. Like I've been wondering, why don't they just build them in China and put them on a boat and send 20 of them over here and you get them for $5,000 a piece? That feels like it should be a thing, but it's not a thing.
That is a thing, but it's not $5,000. Yeah,
it should be $5,000.
The problem with China is quality, so you got to like really check your quality control over there. But yeah, so absolutely. And then in LA, so I don't own any of my own deals. I just own sort of shares in the deals, if you will. So I buy into my own deals, but I don't own 100% of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think listening to Brandon Turner talk about tiny homes is like listening to Andre the Giant talk about Weight Watchers. What it's gonna be. Brandon would need like 3 tiny homes stacked on top of each other just to get inside of one.
I used to live in a car, so I slept in a car. I didn't live in the car. I slept in the car every day. So
with the windows rolled down and your feet sticking out.
I just curled up in a little ball and crying myself to sleep.
Listen, compared to a Prius, a tiny house is huge.
Yes, I agree. I Prius camping. We did that for years. It was amazing.
We called you the Trius. You're big as a tree.
I like it.
Okay, so you've got a portfolio of 22 BRRRR properties, or 22 in Kansas City. Yep. And then you're into value add multifamily now. Can you give us like a brief overview of what that looks like as far as how you work yourself into these deals and what you're concentrating on to build your business now?
Yeah, you mean for my portfolio in Kansas City?
Is that where you're doing the value add multifamily?
Well, there's the duplex model in LA, so I could talk about that.
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah. So it's really kind of a cool model. So in LA, you have, obviously there's zoning, right? And so there's a lot of zoning that is single family home, but there's also a lot of zoning that allow multi-units. But on those multi-unit zoned lots, you just only have one single family home, right? So it's one of these like highest and best use questions, right? So what is kind of the maximum build of that property? And so what I do in LA is I look for properties, in areas that are like, I like to call them trendsetter adjacent. So they're not, it's not your like hot market. It's the market like right outside of that. And then I'm buying a single family home and I'm tearing it down and I'm building 2 very large duplexes. And what we're actually doing is, as you guys know, when you do construction, you're exposed to a lot of like time and cost risk. And so the group that I'm with, we were like, how are we going to control this? Right. And so we ended up going with prefabricated construction. So prefabricated construction is really, really cool. It's like a kit of parts. And what you do is you have like a parallel process, right? So, you've got your lot, you scrape the lot, and then you pour foundations. And while you're doing all of that, you're actually in the factory building all of the pieces that are going to become your house. It's kind of like Legos, where you're building all the pieces and then you're taking them to the site and then you're putting them all together. So it was really cool because there was a project that we were doing and it was next to a stick-built home. And it was just ridiculous. Like it was basically done before they had finished framing the second story, And so it was just this awesome comparison. But so it's just way faster. So it's not necessarily cheaper, although it's a little bit cheaper, but the real savings is on time. And getting back to time is money, it's huge, right? You're quicker to bring this, to rent, to market, whatever it's going to be. And you just don't have that exposure when your projects don't go over a long period of time. So so it's prefabricated construction. It's 2 duplexes on a lot. Everyone is a little bit different. That's what's cool about prefabricated versus modular, which is like what you were talking about of, can they pre-assemble this in China and ship it over? That's modular, where it's already totally built. But this is a kit of parts, so it can be completely customized to the lot. And, this is LA and real estate is very valuable. So we want to maximize every buildable square foot that we can.
What's the permit process like with like earthquake code and stuff like that for these modular homes?
Oh, with prefabricated construction.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's exactly the same as stick built. There's no difference. But so what we do is there's another risk that I didn't talk about is entitlement risk, right? So if you have to go by in front of the planning board and talk the public into approving your project, you don't want to do that because it takes a long time. So what we do is buy right construction. And so I mentioned, we're buying like a 7,000 square foot lot that is zoned for 4 units. So that is called buy right construction. And so you basically just go straight to permitting. And so, you hire a structural engineer, you have an architect, and they design your project, and then it goes through the permitting process. It usually takes about 3 months. And we'll even try to get started on all that stuff while we're still in escrow because it's, it's free. Once you haven't closed, it's still free. So.
All right. So is it, by the way, is prefab the same as like SIP panels? Like I've heard that term SIP panels. Is that the same thing? Do you know?
I've never heard that term, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's the same. Yeah. So it's this, it doesn't appraise for any different. I mean, it's still standard materials. It's still wood and everything. It's just because you've already done a lot of that assembly work in the factory, it's just way faster. So like you can frame out, for example, 1 floor of like 1 duplex in a day. It's really, really fast.
I had a buddy who did that with it. He actually built his whole house that way. They built the panels off site, brought them in, and he just operated a crane, and they just like dropped all the pieces into place.
Yeah.
Are they is the wiring already in there, or does that come after? There's drywall there, or is it just the actual bare wood walls, or what's it like?
So it's basically the kit that you get is the dry wood walls, and then it includes like what we call MEPs. So like your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of that comes with this prefabricated kit. And it's all built. So it's built at the factory. So they actually have this thing called a core. So they build this core, and that's where all your plumbing and electrical and everything is. And then everything in your house backs up to that core. So it's really an innovation on construction, and it's very, very cool. So, and that's all been assembled at the factory. So they just bring it on a crane and then they drop it in.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
And then you can finish. Oh yeah. Sorry, I was just going to mention that you can finish it out with whatever you want. So you get basically a shell, right? And then you just put in your flooring and your drywall and your cabinet, whatever you want, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, I wonder if you couldn't do that with like tiny homes. Like maybe that's a way to bring down the prices, like prefab tiny homes. Maybe that's how they do it. I don't know, but it feels like
you know what makes it really cheap, Brandon, is if you put together your own tiny home.
So
that
would make that cheap.
Can you buy a tiny home at IKEA yet? Yeah.
Yes, I will do it. Oh yeah, I built this shed that I'm in right now. Okay, I didn't. I had a contractor build most of it, but this whole entire shed cost like, I don't know, $20,000 to build. And it's got no bathroom, but whatever.
You built the idea that the contractor executed on your shed.
There, look at that. See, and I did the flooring, but whatever. See, I got the shell, and then I finished it up.
All 7 laminate panels.
Exactly. So I want to know more about the details real quick before we go to before we kind of close this thing out about the build, the numbers. But I want to go to the deal deep dive soon. We're gonna go to deal deep dive soon. So I'm wondering, in your deal deep dive, before I go there, are you talking about one of these fourplex things, or should we go there first?
Let's go there first, because that wasn't my deal deep dive.
Okay, cool. So let's go there first. I'm just curious, what do you typically buy in a lot for? What does it cost to tear down a house? What does it cost to build a new one? And then are you selling them or are you renting them? And how does the math work behind this?
Yeah. So all great questions. So, the lot acquisition really depends on where it is, right?
Sure.
And so we're buying the lots anywhere from like between, the cheapest one I got was I think 550 or 520. And then all the way up to like 1.15. I usually cap out around 1.2. This is for tear down, but this is LA, right?
Wow.
Keep in mind it's LA. So we purchase those. That's like our acquisition price. And then our exit is based on what our cap rate is going to be, because these are rental properties. So they're built as rental properties. So we talk about like a build cap, which is similar to like a cap rate if you're just buying an existing multifamily, right? And so, so how much does it cost to do these things? It really all depends on the lot, but what we're really looking for, usually this is the profile of the lot. It's between 6,000, 7,000 square feet. It has certain zonings that work for 4 units, but not more, right? Because if it had a zoning where you could build really, really high density, then it would be more valuable. We wouldn't be able to buy it, right? So usually like the buy right construction on the site is maybe between, between 4 and 7 units or something like that, right? So it's not super high density. And this is what we would call infill development, right? We're in neighborhoods. All the lots are already built out. And so then, in terms of demolition, again, it depends on how big of a home is there, but that'll, the site prep could be anywhere between 20 and 50. I mean, it could go, we had one lot we looked at and we thought the demo was going to be around 125. So, I mean, it can get, and that's all of the site prep. It's not just the demo of the home, but so it depends on how large the home is. And we just figure, we just underwrite every single line item cost, right? And calculate it and say like, okay, well, what's the rent when we're finished? And, how much is this going to be worth? And we back into, well, we can afford to pay $800 for this lot, or we can, but like
Sure.
I have one closing.
It's just like flipping where you just work backwards.
Yeah. You just work backwards. Yeah. And so, it'll only work, like the rents have to be decently high. And we're also building large units. So we're building like either 4 or 5 bedroom units. And the reason we're doing that is because of parking requirements. So parking kills all deals in LA. But you can't do underground parking because it'll kill every deal. Anyway, so I could go on and on about exactly, what we're looking for, but think about it like a build cap is like the similar to when you're acquiring a mobile home park or when you're acquiring a multifamily or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So then the idea being you're selling these to investors who are just trying to get a return on their investment. So I'm a rich investor. I want to just get a return. So you build this property. I'm like, okay, I'll pay $2 million for that fourplex. And then that's how you guys get your money back. Is that right?
Yeah, it's usually more like $3 million, but
really? For a fourplex?
So yeah.
It's just insane. Yeah. What do they rent for? Like what's a $3 million fourplex rent for?
So yeah, the exits are usually between 2 and 3 million. So it just depends. And we always forecast really conservative values. So what's cool about this model is that we are building for sale products, but they are rental properties. And so if anything, this is like always preparing, right? real estate is cyclical and you have to be prepared. I always say, like, winter is coming. How are you preparing? Right. And so what I really like about this model is that although you are building a for sale product, you can rent it out, and we can rent it out and ride through any kind of correction in the market or anything like that. So you've got that downside protection.
Yeah.
And so, yes, people are coming in. We always say, it's a 4 unit. So we have to look at comps, but then we also are looking at a cap rate. And we're always pretty conservative on it. Actually, we always underwrite it between like a 5.1 and a 5.2, even up to like a 5.4 cap on the exit, and then never exceeding the area comps. So, And we use a construction lender. And so they're actually, checking all of that, right? So if they wouldn't lend on the project, then that means that they don't think that the exit value is high enough to lend. And so that's a good indicator that the project might not be viable. So
that's smart. So I'm blown away that like an investor like would pay like $3 million for a fourplex. Like what's a 4-bedroom, half of a duplex rent for in LA? Like, to use like is that $10,000 a month or is it $1,000 a month? Like where is it?
Yeah. So a 4 or 5 bedroom will rent, I think on the low end, maybe 3,500, maybe in our more B- areas, I guess.
Yeah.
And then on the high end, probably for a 4 unit, I don't think we've ever gone over 4,400, but I actually think we can rent them for more than that. But again, you always want to be conservative in your underwriting, but you also want to be realistic, right? Otherwise, no deal's ever going to work. So
Sure.
Yeah, I know, but it is that value. So think about how much income it's actually producing. Plus you're getting a brand new product, right? Brand new. And the other thing is that, rent control in LA and California rent control. So these properties are exempt from that. So there's a lot of value there. So you could get, there's that, you have that, that you have this new construction and it's not subject to rent control. And then you could also just it's like the ultimate house hack, right? To buy this 4 unit, it's expensive, but you have all these bedrooms, right? You have like between, 16 and 20 bedrooms, right? So if you do the rent by the room model, you could really kill it on that.
I know it sounds crazy because we're not at the 1% roll with this. If you're like,
it's like so far below it, but
it's about half or less, right? Like 4,000 a unit is about 16,000 total. So it would have to be 1.6 million. If you're selling it for 3, you're a little over half, maybe like 0.55. But here's what you're not thinking about in California real estate. They're not looking at it from an ROI perspective as much as they are from an IRR perspective. They're thinking, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to hold it for 5 to 10 years. It's going to generate some kind of money, but then when I exit, it's going to be worth 4.5, 5 million. That's kind of how like California real estate is a different animal in that sense. And what Brandon's saying is a very good point because that's what everybody else looks at. Like when we're helping house hackers in the Bay Area, I'll get, what do you mean I'm going to be coming out of pocket $1,200? I thought you guys said you could get the house to pay for itself. I'm like, yeah, it does work that way in Kansas City, Missouri, where you can buy a triplex for 80 grand. But in California, your mortgage would be $9,000 a month in Silicon Valley. You're going to be coming out of pocket $1,400. That's a pretty big win, right? That's a really, really big win. It makes sense to do it. It's about understanding kind of like tempering your expectations and knowing what the play is, because it's not uncommon when we help people out here that house hack will buy a place for 1.2, will spend 50 grand to be able to turn it into something they can house hack. Their mortgage will be 3 grand a month instead of 9 grand a month, and it's now worth 1.35. Right, like that. It's common all the time. There's houses right down the street with comps that are that much more. And in 2 years of this crazy like springtime, summertime, nuts, like it's like the Hunger Games around here with all these people fighting for the same house. It's gonna be worth 1.8, and then when you sell it, you look like a genius that made 400 grand and saved on your rent. But it's completely different than what you can expect if you go to somewhere in the Midwest or the South, and that's kind of what you have to think about with what Lee's doing here. Is it's going to appreciate a lot. You don't have to fight to buy a property and try to evict a tenant that has some kind of like rent control protection where you can't raise the rent on them and they're only paying $1,200 a month. We run into those problems in California a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking at, there's these 4 wealth generators of real estate, right? There's, appreciation, which is both market and forced appreciation. There's tax benefits, there's cash flow, and then there's principal pay down, right? And so I'm pretty analytical. So I've looked at this, and I've looked at this for my actual deals. And I have a real deal actually in mind. So going through those 4, right? My overall contributor to my ROI, right? If all four of those were equal and you pictured a pie, it would be split 25% for each, right?
Sure.
But it's not at all. So on my recent deal, it's 78% of my return came from forced appreciation, some market appreciation as well. 11% came from tax benefits, 7% came from cash flow, and 4% came from principal pay down. And so if you want to make a big win, look to where the big drivers on that return on investment are.
That's such a great point. Yeah, I've never known anybody that actually quantified those percentages. You're my kind of people, just so you know. This is great.
Well, I love it. You basically articulated what Brandon and I just kind of do by our subconscious or by second nature. Is you made an algorithm in your own head that said if appreciation is the main driver in an IRR model, then that makes sense. And Brandon and I have actually had a conversation very similar where we realize at a certain point, cash flow isn't necessarily as important as when you're new. We had this example of what if you bought a house in Beverly Hills for $10 million and you lost $1,000 every month or $2,000 every month. And then 5 years later, that mansion was worth 16 million or 15 million. Would you really be that upset that you lost, 12 grand a year or something, that you just made $5 million over that period of time? But what you have to do is zoom out. When you zoom in super hard, which is always what happens when you're scared, when you're feeling fear, you just zoom in and you look at what could go wrong. And you have to force yourself to zoom out and see, what could go right, and then make an informed decision. That's a great point, Lee. If cash flow is 4% of your overall profit, why is that the part you're focusing on so hard?
Yeah. And so, a note on cash flow, when I first started, I was very sold on cash flow. I think a lot of new investors are. And cash flow is really, really important because it is your hedge. Your cash flow is your margin of safety. It makes it so that you do not lose your property. And that is really, really important, but it is not a very big contributor to your overall ROI.
Oh, yeah. I say that all the time. Cash flow really is a defensive metric. It protects you from losing the property. But people who build big wealth through real estate do it in a very boring way, like we said earlier, holding property for a very long period of time, letting the loan pay down and letting it appreciate.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, one last question before we move to the deal deep dive. On those properties, are you separating the water? I'm assuming so the tenants will pay their own water, or is the landlord responsible for, is it one just meter going in?
Oh, no, it's all sub-metered. I mean, it's all new construction, right? So we can totally do that.
So this is I want to bring that point up because when you buy, if you were going to go, because water bills, primarily water, but because the usual electricity is already sub-metered. But when you're looking at a fourplex, some people are like, well, would I pay $1 million for a fourplex? And the biggest question I always want to know is who pays the water. And so when you're building new construction, I love the fact that, let's say you just built new construction fourplexes just to own for yourself. If you were doing that, let's just say, right? You can sub-meter them. You can add the additional bedrooms because you're going to get way higher rent for it. We talked with Joe Asamoah a while ago about the Section 8 numbers, how dramatically they're higher for more bedrooms. So you can do all those things to make it way better than buying a used fourplex that you pay the water and the property's going to fall apart every year and you got to fix all this stuff and the roof's going bad in a few years. So again, it goes back to what I said way earlier, that real estate is multidimensional. It's not, is this a good deal? There's 100 ways to skin a cat here and to try to figure out what makes a good deal. And so you can invest in LA in an expensive market and find a way to make it work. You can invest in Kansas City, find a way to make it work. And you can find a way to make it work in every other market in between. And so people just come up with excuses why it doesn't work in their market. And I love that you are doing both. I think that's just the theme of the show is you figured it out in both markets. So way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And the strategy is different, right? And so you have to know, those markets, you have to know what's possible and where your returns are going to be and everything. But both are really great real estate markets for different reasons. And I actually think they're a great combination.
Yeah.
Right. More Kansas City's like the bonds in your portfolio, and LA is like the Apple and Tesla in your portfolio.
Yep.
But what's really cool about what I'm doing in LA is that it does have this downside protection, and I wouldn't want to do it if it didn't,
Yeah. That's why we're doing the mobile home park thing right now. Cause I look at the mobile home parks. I'm like, I'm just filling, I'm buying properties that have 70% occupancy. So there's 30% room there.
Yeah.
So if the economy turns, more and more people are losing their job, more people need to move to a mobile home park. So we just infill more. And so it's downside protection again. I'm always thinking right now, I'm not worried about a recession, but I'm always thinking about a recession. You kind of said something earlier about that too. You're always thinking, what if that happens?
Yeah.
And it's smart. Very smart.
Yeah. You always want to make sure you're protected. My attorney said you can't say recession proof. So
nope,
I
recession
won't.
resistant. That's what I usually say. It's recession
she didn't like that either, actually.
I know
I
they
just
probably
don't
don't like that. Yeah.
Downside protection is my new.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, very, very cool. Well, I want to keep talking about this for about 10 more hours, but we've got to get on with this show. So let's get over to the next segment. It is our Deal
Deep Dive.
All right. This is the part of the show where we dive deep into something that you've done, a deal that you've done. So Lee, let's get into that. You got something in mind that we can pick apart?
Absolutely.
All right. So what is this property? Like, what is it and where is it at?
It is a fourplex and it is in Liberty, Missouri, which is a suburb of Kansas City.
All right.
And how did you find this deal?
This is great. So I joined all of these Facebook groups. There's like buy, sell local Facebook groups. So I joined all these ones in Kansas City thinking one of these days, someone's going to post a property on these. And my wife was making fun of me because she saw my Facebook feed and she's like, what is all that junk in there? It'll be like one baby shoe. Like there's someone selling counterfeit laundry detergent. Like it's just ridiculous, right? But I knew one day this would happen and it did. So here it is.
It's funny you say that. I just joined 3 of them in the Bay Area because I'm so tired of all the deals that are on the MLS going for 25 offers on everything. And like, at least if you're in one of these groups, you may pay fair market value, but it's better than paying 200,000 over. Yeah. I'm a fan of the Facebook groups. You should be joining them, everybody. Just not the ones where I live. I don't want the competition.
Yeah. So join your local Facebook groups. And so it was actually in sort of an obscure one. It was like the Northland Swap Meet or something. And I see on there, so it's Bob. And he's got his phone number and there's just a picture of the outside of the fourplex.
That's it.
Found it on Facebook.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. How much was it? Or what was Bob asking?
So Bob was asking $150,000. And I, know the market really well. And I know what kind of rents are achievable with a nice rehab. And so I knew fixed up, it was worth very conservatively 280, probably more like 300, maybe even a little bit more. So I knew that was a deal. Now it definitely needed some rehab.
So you bought it at the 150?
Yeah, I did actually. I bought it for 150. So you have another question about how did you finance it? But basically Bob I talked to him on the phone. So I see this ad, right? I talked to him, I give him a call and it's because he's posted in this obscure group. It's only like me and one other person, right? Yeah. So I call up my local partner who's awesome, Derek and Trista Fenner. I actually met them through BiggerPockets and we, became friends and then we started working together and they're great, total rock stars. And so I call up Derek and I'm like, hey, can you meet this guy, tomorrow at 10 a.m.? So I'm like, just go over there and bond with him, right? And so, of course they have stuff in common. They both race cars. I don't know, right? And it was just us and one other group. And so Bob was saying, I'll give you 10, if you give me 10% down, I'll give you 6% financing with a 20-year AM and a 10-year balloon. So I knew that there was all this upside. So could I have negotiated and tried to get it for 120 or 130? Yes, I could. But the way that I beat out that other party was basically by not negotiating. Yep. And, I knew that there was a lot of upside, right? So I knew that I was going to be able to get, 70 grand in equity, right? So like, sure, I could get 80 grand in equity, or I could just take the 70 and get the deal done, right?
Yeah.
And then
David, you bring this. Yeah, David brings that up a lot. Like people are so keen on getting a deal, but it's more about like, does the numbers work? Like if you pay 10 grand over asking price, does it work? So stop whining about it.
Yeah, I just had a conversation about that with a group I belonged to the other day, where we shouldn't be saying, did I get as good of a deal as that person? Or could I, making up a scenario in your head and then saying, did I get as good as I could have gotten? You should just be saying, is it better to buy it or not buy it? It really is that simple. Do I want to lose this deal over 10 grand and walk away from $70,000 in equity? All right. 30 years later, will I even care that I could have got 80 grand in equity instead of 70 when it's got 500 grand or $1 million, right? And I've really changed the way I think because we shoot ourselves in the foot so often. I see this with clients all the time that don't want to pay ask price or don't want to pay over asking price on a house that's worth, like, it's listed at 900,000 and they have to pay $1,050,000 to get it, but there's a comp on the street for 1.15, 100 grand more, right? Like it all is where you put your baseline. Is the baseline the comp or is the baseline the list price? And it's really, really stupid to get caught looking at the wrong one.
Right. If you're getting a bunch of equity in a deal, just focus on that, right? Like this was a deal and it worked. And because Bob was asking 150, and I paid him 150. It was super easy to get the deal done.
Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right.
And the seller financing was also very valuable to me.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, you mentioned that a minute ago.
If you tick off Bob, does Bob still want to give you seller financing? Is Bob coming after you for a better interest rate now, right? Like you mentioned
it's interesting
earlier.
because actually we're about to refinance it. So we finished like the total reposition and we're going to cash out refinance it. But I was thinking what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the appraisal from the bank and then I'm going to call Bob and say, hey, I'm going to refinance with the bank for this. Would you rather this is you?
Yeah, that's smart. In fact, actually, I just approached a guy yesterday because I said, I got a hard money lender that will do 8% on this flip I'm about to do. Would you like 8% instead? Like it's such a great negotiation because it's like not a big deal. Take it or leave it. Like I'm not asking you to do something unreasonable. Yep. But hey, if you want 8% on your money on this flip, you know, you can have what the bank's going to have. So I love that you're doing that for Bob. That's such a great negotiation tactic.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about, seller financing is so many less fees, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Oh yeah,
you
totally.
save a lot there. Yeah.
What if you said no on seller financing? You had to pay closing costs to buy it, and then you had to pay closing costs again when you went to go refi it. And maybe you work out a deal with Bob where he doesn't make you pay any interest while you're repositioning it, and you save way more than the 10 grand you think you could have got on the purchase price because you weren't worried about a vanity metric. You were actually looking at the big picture. You zoomed out.
Yep.
Absolutely. You're really smart, Lee, in case somebody's ever told you.
Oh, that's nice of you, David.
And I was thinking, David, you should write a book called Zoom Out. That would be a good business book, right? Zoom out. And it's all about looking at your business as a whole. Not
Do you guys see what I'm saying about Brandon is the best marketing mind in the world? There's nobody better. He just
You're like the best wingman in the world, right
beard.
there.
Oh, thank you.
I think you said it. All right, moving on. You talked about how you funded it, then seller financing. Those are unfamiliar with seller financing. It basically means Bob carried the mortgage, so you paid him every month. It's kind of like if you sell your car to your brother, and your brother pays you $100 a month for your car. It's the same thing, just with a house. So there's no bank involved. But now you're going to refinance, which is awesome. So what did you do with it? I mean, you kind of mentioned you still have it today. You're going to refinance it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I bought it about a year and maybe 3 months ago, something like that, late 2018. And so when we got it, we had what I like to call legacy tenants, which usually don't work out very well. But so we had one unit vacant. So we went ahead and turned that unit. And then one of the guys wasn't paying. So we ended up we evicted him and then we turned his unit. And so the delta that I look for, between current rent and market rent is usually like between 250 or 300, and more is fine. But at least that you need to have that delta. So sometimes it makes me laugh. You see like a broker's back and it's like value add potential, $25 more per month on the rent. You're like, that's pretty much at maximum rent, right? You need to have that big jump, right? To add a lot of value. But it was the same. I knew the market. I knew with a nice rehab, we could get, $795, something like that. And they were all the rents when we bought it were like 500, 550, something like that. And so, and it was, it wasn't fixed up. So that was the market for the current condition. Right.
Yep.
But then it could be repositioned. So then we just turned each unit slowly through time. And so now we have the upper two rented, and then the bottom one, we just finished renovating. And then we have one, this is about my record on legacy tenants, about 25% of them work out. So we have one good one. And so then it's like, this woman and her husband, so they moved into the one we just renovated so we could renovate their unit because they agreed that they would pay higher rent if we renovated. Then they're going to move back into their original unit, then we'll rent that last one. So that'll all be finished, I just think, in a couple of weeks. And we've already ordered the appraisal from the bank. So I have a takeout lender and he's willing to do 75 LTV because we've held it for more than a year. So again, like the value conservatively is 280, probably a little bit more. And we will get the bulk of our money back. And that has been my experience in value add deals or BRRRR deals is you get most of it, but I've never actually gotten all of it.
And that's okay. The difference between leaving $5,000 in a deal, getting all of it out, or pulling an extra $5,000 out at the end of the day is really just $10,000 plus or minus. It's not, it doesn't have to be a certain way to make it a win.
No, absolutely. And I'm totally happy with it. Actually, my favorite is to leave like maybe $10 in because an
then you get an
infinite
ROI,
cash on
right?
cash return is kind of unsatisfying,
Yeah.
but like a
Yeah.
12,000% cash on cash return.
That's a really good point. I left $4 in the deal. Because if you don't leave any money, you're like, well, there is no ROI because there was no I. I can't count that.
Yeah. That $5, like
Not
it's
satisfying.
amazing.
Yeah, that's really funny.
I also like what you said about like legacy tenants, 25% of the time work out. That's probably similar to what I see.
That's exactly what I see too. Yep.
It's usually, so most people, when they have a property that's performing well with good tenants and they're not thinking about it, they don't want to sell it. Most landlords say, screw it, I want to get rid of this thing when something's causing them trouble, and it's usually the tenant. So it's not a good thing just inherently when someone says, oh, buy it with tenants in it, you'll have no vacancy. Like, no, you're probably just buying an eviction is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is also why one of the strategies I like talking about for finding deals is to get the local eviction records from the courthouse, and then just contact all those landlords that are in the middle of an eviction that just filed for eviction, because all those landlords are in that pit of hell that I'm like, I hate this rental property. And then all of a sudden somebody randomly calls them and says they want to buy the rental property. Yeah, you're buying an eviction, but it's already been started for one thing.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
so good. I just told someone that the other day. They said, why would anyone ever want to sell their rental? Everybody wants them. I said, because not everyone listens to Bigger
I said the
Pockets.
same thing too. I'm like, because they don't read our books and they don't listen to Bigger Pockets.
Yeah.
So like most landlords are terrible landlords and hate being landlords.
And probably didn't want to be one in the first place, right?
They
They
got it from
inherited the house from someone
Exactly.
else, or they lived in it and then they rented it out and now they're stuck with it. That's exactly right. For them, you're buying their problem.
Yeah, it's true. All right, last question of the deal deep dive, David.
What lessons did you learn from this deal?
Well, always, the value of relationships, those local partners, the fact that Derek took my call. He said, yeah, of course I'll be there at 10 a.m. if you think this is a great deal, right? So that's huge. And then what else? I think the value of kind of what we were already talking about, if the deal is good at the list and you can buy it from the seller at that price, don't negotiate just to negotiate, actually negotiate for something. And in this case, I could pay him what he wanted. Everyone was going to be happy. I was going to get all these other benefits. And I just think it's important to remember that. I could have gone in and tried to negotiate him down 20 grand or whatever, but it wasn't worth it. Again, zooming out, right? It wasn't really worth it. And I can kind of suss that out, right? So I built a relationship with him, the seller, and his wife. They were moving to Florida. And then, I had the relationships with the local partners. And sometimes, people are really focused on the deal, but they're not focused on the team and the relationships. And that can be as important as the actual property itself, right?
So good. Yeah, so good. I think one of the biggest negotiation mistakes people make, or the things that can help them most, is just to understand the situation in which you're in, like whether or not you should negotiate more or not. Like, there are times where you can definitely negotiate. Like, we got a call on a house a couple days ago from our website. We have a lead gen website. We got a call on it, and we knew that we were the only one that this person was talking to because we built a relationship, we built a rapport. So we knew we could push harder. And so I think we ended up negotiating him down 75 grand or something like that, 65 grand. But we only knew we could do that because we knew she wasn't competing. If it was on the MLS, I can guarantee you I would have just paid the, paid the full price or offered what I could and known that I wasn't going to probably get it. But yeah, know where you're at is a huge tip on negotiation.
Absolutely. Right. And it's always, those funny people will say, well, yeah, knock 75 grand off of it. And you're like, there's a full price, cash backup offer. Like we're not in a position to do that. And so know your position. Right.
Yeah. So good.
So know your position, but also you usually have a little more power than you think you do. So I probably could have pushed on that. It wasn't really worth it to me because it was fair and there was so much equity and,
The juice was not worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
All right. There we go. All right. Well, let's close up this deal deep dive and head over to the last segment of the show. I think we'll bypass the fire round this week because it's a long show, but and it was so good. But let's get to the famous four. All right, this is the part of the show where we ask 4 questions that we've asked every guest for hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And we're going to throw them at you right now, Leah. Are you ready for this? I know you've heard the podcast, so you know what's coming.
I think I've listened to every episode since I started listening back around episode 100. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, with that means you might not have listened to episode 92, which was my story.
Actually, I don't think I did.
Oh, man, you got to go back and hear my story. It's all right. The famous 4. Number 1, favorite real estate related book, Lee.
So I actually think a great real estate book is The Ultimate Beginner's Guide, the BiggerPockets Guide, which is free. And I was, I was telling about my story and how I was driving around Iceland with my friend, right? And I said, I really want to do this. And he said, I do too. And on the plane ride home from Iceland, about 8 hours. So I downloaded that and I read it and I like really, really read it. And I picked, and it says like, go through and like pick your strategy. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is the strategy that makes sense. So I actually really, I give BiggerPockets a ton of credit for teaching me these concepts of real estate and providing these great resources, right? That's an incredible book, and it's like a free pamphlet.
What about your favorite business book?
So I'm going to go with one that I've never heard anyone mention, which is Choose Yourself by James Altucher.
James Altucher, yeah.
Yeah, do you know that one? Yeah.
I do. It's a great book.
He knows every book ever written.
That made a big
you, Brandon.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, that made a big impact on me as well. It's an awesome book.
Yeah.
Brandon named his new son Wilder. His middle name is Dewey after the Dewey Decimal System because he's basically a librarian. Brandon's going to retire as a librarian. Yes, hoarding all these books. He's going to be this like really wise old man.
I think it was Kevin, actually. Was it you, Kevin? Kevin's our producer. He's on the call. Was that you that texted me the other day about meeting James Altucher? Anyway, choose yourself. Tell us about it.
So the premise is basically, whatever the corporate hierarchy is kind of dead. And so whatever you were going to go do for someone else, just go do it for yourself, Yeah. And this was kind of my realization where I, built a business for someone else, right?
It applies in so many areas of our life too. Like, yeah, you could wait for someone to choose you, like, to be a real estate investor, to be wealthy, to have financial freedom, to get a vacation time, to be a podcaster. Or you can just be like, hey, in today's economy, you can choose yourself. Like, stop waiting to be picked. Like, oh, put me in, coach. Just like, go make your own game and then put yourself in.
Yeah. And I
just
think
know that might mean you have to apprentice for a while before you can do that.
Thinking about, okay, am I waiting for someone to give me permission to go and do these things? They're not. That's not going to happen. No one really cares what you're doing. So if you want to go do something, you want something, like, you better go get it.
All right. I love that. What are some of your favorite hobbies?
So, I really love nature and the outdoors. That's why I became a field biologist. And if we ever, go hiking together, I can tell you the scientific name of every plant, bird, butterfly. And I absolutely love the Eastern Sierra. And so I'm really excited that I just bought this rental property for myself up there in the mountains. And it's already been really fun. And then, so I love backpacking. So I'd like to go on like couple big backpacking trips per year. So this is like niching in, right? I really like temperate mountain landscapes between 40 and 45 degrees latitude that are above the tree line.
Wow.
That is very specific. That's knowing your niche for sure.
That's funny. Crazy. All right. Last question for me. What separates successful real estate investors from all those who give up, fail, or never get started?
So if you'd asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have said action. But what I realized is that mindset is the mother of action. And so it's really just all about your mindset. It's
not about tactics. I mean, we can all figure out tactics. It's like, why aren't you making those phone calls? And that usually has something deeper. That's a mindset issue. Why aren't you analyzing that deal?
I know it is, because Brandon and I, as we sit here in mastermind trying to figure out how can we help more people, it always inevitably comes up to mindset, not real estate, not tactics,
every time.
Not numbers.
Yeah, every time. Well, Lee, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I think David's got one final question for you, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, this has been awesome. You are a very intelligent investor, and I learned a lot listening to you. So thank you for sharing.
You should write a book, Lee, called The Intelligent Investor. I think that's been done.
That's a wonderful name. I wonder why that sounds so familiar.
I wonder if that book has been written. Anyway.
So where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty active on BiggerPockets. I don't really use a lot of other social media. Although maybe through this, maybe I could be motivated to kind of get on Instagram. I think I've posted like 3 photos ever.
TikTok. That's where all the kids are going these days.
Yeah.
I want to see you do some dancing on TikTok. That's where all the kids
I know. I really got to get on TikTok. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. So BiggerPockets is actually a great place to hear more about me. And then I have my own websites. You can see it in my signature on BiggerPockets. It's called Red Hair Holdings. And that's just the name of my company. And I've got a couple, I've got some before and after photos of my projects and things. And honestly, I haven't totally kept up with it, but I have a couple cool blog posts where I talk about, passive losses and understanding some of these concepts in real estate that have been really transformative to me.
Very cool. All right. Well, Lee, this has been really, really, really good. I guess I can't wait to kind of see where you head in the future. Maybe we'll have you back in a few years, and we'll kind of get when you're at the next level. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. This is David Green for Brandon TikTok Turner signing off.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.